The chamber was not built for comfort. It was built for fear. Cold metal walls stretched upward like the ribs of some ancient beast. Blue lights hummed from above, casting long shadows across the floor. At the center of that vast circle stood one human. Alone. Surrounded by dozens of alien commanders and cadets who had come to see her stripped of power. They called her the Survivor. Some whispered that she was a ghost. Others claimed she was cursed. But all knew she had walked out of battles where no one else had lived. Her armor, heavy and scarred, seemed less like protection and more like a second skin. Dust from old wars still clung to it, as though the battlefield refused to let her go. A voice broke the silence, deep and sharp. "Human," the lead commander said, his clawed hand pointing toward her. "Remove your armor. You stand before the council. No weapons. No hiding. Show us your flesh." The words struck like a hammer in the air. Yet the woman did not move. She did not even blink. Behind her helmet, her eyes studied the chamber, every corner, every breath of her captors. She stood calm, steady, as though the command were nothing more than a whisper on the wind. The guards tightened their grips on their rifles. Cadets leaned forward, eager to see the humiliation of the so-called unkillable human. But their eagerness was cut with unease. Something about her silence unsettled them more than any weapon could. Another commander barked, impatient. "Do as ordered, or do you fear what we will see? Perhaps your reputation is nothing but empty words." Still, she did not answer. Her stillness was not weakness. It was power. Every second of silence felt heavier, pressing down on the chamber until even the leaders shifted in their seats. Finally, her hands moved. Slowly, carefully, she lifted them to the sides of her helmet. The sound of locks releasing echoed through the hall. A hiss of air, a click of metal, then silence again. She lifted the helmet free. Her face was revealed, hard, unyielding, carved by years of struggle. Her eyes were cold fire, alive with something the aliens did not understand. She did not look broken, nor did she look afraid. She looked at them the way a storm looks at a shoreline. Patient, waiting, inevitable. Gasps rippled through the cadets. This was not the trembling creature they expected. "Continue," the lead commander ordered, though his voice carried less authority now, more doubt. She lowered the helmet to the ground, setting it down with a deep metallic clang that rang like a warning bell. Her hands moved to the next piece of armor, the plates across her shoulders. Click, snap. The pieces came loose, heavy steel falling to the floor. The sound echoed in the chamber, louder than their own breathing. One by one, she removed the armor. Arm guards, leg plates. Each drop was like thunder rolling through the air. Each piece was another reminder of battles survived, of fire endured, of pain overcome. The pile of armor at her feet grew taller, like a monument to something none of them could kill. A young cadet whispered, barely audible, "Why doesn't she tremble? Why doesn't she look afraid?" The question was simple, but it struck like a knife. The alien commanders glanced at each other, their pride flickering. They had crushed worlds. They had burned cities. Yet here was one human, standing before them, unarmed, and somehow, still unbroken. The woman did not rush. She moved as though time itself bowed to her will. Her chest plate was the last. It was thick, dented, blackened by burns, scarred by strikes from alien weapons that should have ended her. She unfastened it with slow precision, lifted it free, and let it fall. The crash shook the chamber. Dust rose, swirling like smoke around her. The blue lights flickered against the haze, and for a moment she seemed less like a prisoner and more like a force of nature. Something older and stronger than the steel around her. Now she stood in the thin underlayer of her suit. The armor lay scattered, lifeless, at her feet. She had shed it all, but somehow she looked heavier, as though the weight of her presence had only grown. The council stared, silent. They had demanded this moment. They had expected weakness. But what they saw instead was a challenge. The woman finally spoke. Her voice was steady, quiet, but sharp enough to cut through stone. "You want the truth? You asked me to strip away what hides me. Be careful what you demand. The truth is never gentle. The words hung in the air. The guards hesitated. The cadets froze. Even the commanders looked away for a moment, uneasy. It was only the beginning. The scars had not yet been revealed, but already the chamber felt smaller, colder. The aliens realized something they had not prepared for. This human was not simply obeying. She was making them watch. She was turning their command into her weapon. And though none of them said it aloud, the same thought crept into every mind in that hall. What are we about to see? The chamber was silent after the crash of her chest plate hitting the ground. Dust curled in the air, moving like ghosts between the blue lights. Every alien eye was locked on her. She had obeyed the command, but the way she obeyed made it feel like she was in control, not them. Her armor lay scattered, useless metal lying like fallen soldiers around her boots. Yet she stood tall, not smaller without it, but greater. The aliens had expected weakness once the armor was gone. Instead, they saw something that unsettled them even more, strength that did not come from steel. The lead commander's jaw tightened. His voice echoed through the hall. "Remove the rest," he ordered. "We want to see what lies beneath. No barriers. No secrets." His words tried to sound firm, but the edges of his tone wavered. Even he felt the air shift, thick and heavy with something he could not name. The human woman's eyes lifted, calm and sharp. She said nothing, but her silence was louder than any protest. She moved her hands slowly to the underlayer of her suit. The fabric clung to her frame, thin and fragile compared to the armor. Yet even now she moved like a warrior preparing for battle, not a prisoner following commands. The cadets leaned forward. They had come to see a human stripped of defenses. They thought it would prove that humans were nothing but fragile creatures of flesh. Instead, they felt something stir in their chest, something they did not understand. Anticipation mixed with unease. She pulled at the seams of the fabric. The sound of tearing cut through the silence. Piece by piece, the thin covering gave way. And then it happened. Gasps echoed in the chamber. Beneath the suit were not the soft, unmarked features of a helpless being. Her skin carried a map of scars. Long, jagged lines ran across her arms. Burns marked her shoulders. Deep ridges crossed her ribs. Every scar was different. Some thin and sharp, others wide and brutal, but all carried the same story. Survival. The room seemed to shrink. The blue light reflected against the pale, scarred skin, making the marks glow like carved history. The aliens stared wide-eyed. They had expected weakness. Instead, they saw proof of battles where their own kind had failed to kill her. One cadet whispered, his voice trembling. "Those are from us. From the invasion." The older commander silenced him with a glare, but the words could not be undone. Everyone in the chamber now saw it clearly. The scars were not random. They were marks left by alien fire, alien blades, alien cruelty. They were evidence of the wars their fleets had brought to Earth. The woman stood still, letting them look. She did not hide her scars, nor did she flinch under their stares. She allowed the silence to stretch, as if daring them to deny what they saw. Her eyes swept across the chamber, meeting face after face. When her gaze fell on the young cadets, some lowered their heads, ashamed. When her gaze met the commanders, their pride cracked beneath her quiet defiance. She spoke at last, her voice low but cutting. "You wanted to see flesh. You wanted to see weakness. But what you see is survival. Every mark on me is proof that your weapons could not finish what they started." Her words struck harder than any blade. The cadets shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The guards looked at each other, their grips loosening slightly on their rifles. Even the council, seated high above, felt the sting of truth. One of the alien leaders tried to speak, but his words faltered. "These scars, they should have killed you." The woman tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "They did not." 3 words, simple and quiet, but they carried more weight than all the threats in the hall. The silence that followed was heavier than stone. She stepped forward, bare of armor, bare of lies, and yet somehow more dangerous than she had been before. With every step, the sound of her boots against the metal floor rang like a heartbeat. Strong, steady, unstoppable. The cadets could not look away. For years, they had been taught that scars were signs of weakness. Now, before their eyes, they saw them as something else, proof of endurance, proof of strength that even their fleets could not erase. The lead commander clenched his fists. His authority, once towering, now felt fragile. The very act of unmasking the human had backfired. What was supposed to be humiliation had turned into revelation. And yet the woman did not smile, did not gloat. She simply stood there, letting her scars speak for her. She had no need for anger or pride. Her silence was enough. The chamber had demanded an unmasking. But what had been revealed was not weakness, not defeat. What they had uncovered was a truth far more dangerous. This human was unkillable. The chamber had fallen silent, but it was not the silence of discipline anymore. It was the silence of disbelief. Every alien eye was fixed on the human woman who stood in the center. Her armor lay broken at her feet, and her thin suit had been torn away to reveal what no one expected. Her body was covered in scars. Some ran long across her arms like rivers cut into stone. Others burned deep across her shoulders, marks of fire and heat. Across her ribs lay wounds that looked as if claws had once torn into her. Her back carried scars like lightning, jagged and wild. And yet she stood, alive. The cadets stared in horror. They had grown up on stories about humans being weak. They were told that one blast of alien fire could end a human life. But here, standing before them, was proof that those stories were lies. Their own invasion had tried to kill her. The wounds told the story clearly. And still she lived. A young cadet whispered, almost trembling, These are our weapons. Those burns, those cuts. She should have died 100 times. No one silenced him this time. Even the commanders were frozen, their pride shaking. The woman raised her chin, her face calm. She did not look ashamed. She did not hide her scars with her hands. Instead, she turned slowly, letting every eye in the chamber see them. The scars were not marks of defeat. They were proof that she had stood against their empire and refused to break. The lead commander narrowed his eyes. His voice was sharp, but not steady. You survived this? No human should have lived through even one of those wounds. How are you standing here? Her eyes locked on his. For the first time, there was a spark of fire in her voice. Because I am human. Because we do not break as easily as you think. Her words spread like a blade cutting through the air. The cadets shifted uncomfortably, their training suddenly feeling small compared to the truth in her tone. One of the elder council members leaned forward, his voice quieter, almost curious. But why do you show us this? Why reveal yourself? The woman's lips pressed into a thin line. She answered without hesitation. Because you asked. Because you wanted to see the truth. And the truth is this. Your fleets could burn our cities. Your soldiers could tear our land. Your weapons could scar our bodies. But you could not kill us. You could not kill me. The chamber trembled with her words. Some cadets lowered their heads, unable to meet her eyes. A few commanders clenched their fists, anger rising not at her defiance, but at the shame her scars carried for them. She took a slow step forward, her scars glowing faintly in the blue light. You thought armor made me strong. You thought weapons gave me power. But look closer. Strength is not in the steel I wear. It is in the flesh that refused to die. It is in the scars that tell you, I stood against your empire, and I still stand now. The words struck deep. The cadets could not forget the wars they had studied, the reports they had read. They remembered the stories of soldiers who had hunted humans, only to return empty-handed or not at all. Now they understood why. Every scar was a lesson written on her body. A burn told the story of fire raining from alien ships. A deep cut spoke of blades that had failed to finish her. A jagged mark across her side told of an explosion that should have ended her life. Each scar was a memory of pain turned into survival. The woman did not need to shout. Her silence between sentences was enough. The chamber felt heavier with every word, every scar, every breath she took. One cadet, his voice breaking, whispered to another, She looks stronger without armor than with it. The other nodded, unable to deny it. The lead commander slammed his fist against the arm of his chair, trying to reclaim control. You dare shame us with these marks? You stand here as if your survival means victory. Her eyes did not waver. I do not need to claim victory. My scars already speak it. You tried to destroy me. You failed. That is all the victory I need. The chamber went quiet again. But this time it was not disbelief. It was realization. The cadets looked at each other, the truth sinking into them like ice. They had been taught that humans were fragile. But here, before their very eyes, stood proof that fragility was a lie. The human woman stood in silence once more, her scars bared like banners of war. She had revealed them not for pity, not for respect, but for truth. A truth that burned more painfully than any weapon. Aliens could scar her body, but they could never kill her will. And that was the power they had never understood. The chamber was silent, but in that silence, the woman's scars seemed to speak louder than words. The alien cadets stared at them with wide eyes, but she herself was far away. For a moment, her gaze softened, her breath slowed, and her mind slipped back into memories. The scars were not just marks. They were doors to the past. And one of those doors opened now. She saw fire, cities burning under alien skies. The sky once blue, now black with smoke and red with flames. She was younger then, her armor newer, her heart still learning what it meant to fight. The invasion had come like a storm, tearing through buildings, crushing families, leaving only chaos behind. In the memory, she ran through the rubble of a collapsed street. Screams filled the air. Children cried from beneath the broken stones. Her hands, still trembling with fear, pulled at the debris, lifting heavier weight than her body should have carried. She remembered the sharp claws of exhaustion cutting into her muscles. But she kept moving, because a small voice cried out for help. The cadets in the chamber could not see the memory, but they could see it in her eyes. They could sense the way her stare grew distant, as though she was reliving the flames. Another door opened, a battlefield. She remembered the day alien troops stormed a village. Their rifles burned through homes, their machines roared through the streets. She stood with only a small blade, her rifle long destroyed. The aliens laughed at her defiance. But she fought. Every swing of her weapon, every strike of her hand, carried the fury of someone who had nothing left to lose. She was cut down again and again, her blood spilling across the dirt. But every time she fell, she rose. That was where the scar across her ribs came from. A blade driven into her side. She remembered the pain, hot and endless. She remembered falling into the mud, her vision dark. But she also remembered a single thought that pulled her back. If I die, they win. And so she rose. The council chamber remained quiet as her memories pressed against her. Another scar burned in her mind, a burn that wrapped across her shoulder. It came from fire, the kind only alien warships could rain down. She had been caught in the blast, her skin screaming in agony, the world turning white with pain. Others around her had fallen. But when the smoke cleared, she was still crawling forward, still alive, still moving toward the next battle. She remembered the faces of her people. Some had hope, some had fear, but all of them looked to her. She was not their leader, not a commander, just one survivor among many. Yet in their eyes, her survival gave them strength. Her pain gave them courage. And that was when she understood her scars were not hers alone. They belonged to everyone who had fought, everyone who had fallen. She carried their stories carved into her flesh. Her eyes blinked, pulling her halfway back to the chamber. But the memories still poured. A night in the ruins of a city. Rain mixed with ash as she dragged herself across shattered stone. Her legs were torn, her lungs filled with smoke. An alien patrol passed nearby, searching for survivors. She pressed against the ground, silent, though every nerve in her body screamed. One soldier walked so close his shadow covered her. She thought it was the end. Yet he turned away, leaving her broken but alive. That night left her with another scar, thin and sharp across her arm, a cut from the jagged ruins she crawled through. But it also left her with a promise, to never let her life end quietly. The cadets still watched her in silence, but some of them felt something strange, shame. They had once cheered for their empire's victories. Now they saw the living cost of those victories etched into a single human body. Her mind showed her one last memory, a battlefield of silence, long after the fight. Bodies lay around her, human and alien alike. She stood among them, her blood mixing with theirs, her breath heavy but unbroken. The wind carried only smoke and silence. She remembered whispering to herself, words no one else heard. "You cannot kill me. Not today." The woman's eyes cleared, the memories faded, and the chamber returned to focus. But her face carried the weight of all she had just relived. She did not speak. She didn't need to. The scars had already told their stories. The cadets understood now each mark was not just a wound. It was survival carved into her skin. The lead commander leaned forward, his voice low. "What kept you alive?" Her eyes met his. She did not blink. "Everything you could not take from me." The words were soft, but they struck harder than fire. And the chamber, filled with leaders, soldiers, and cadets, realized the truth. Their invasion had not only failed to kill her, it had created something greater. The scars were not weakness. They were her weapon. The chamber felt heavier than stone. The woman stood in the center, her scars glowing faintly under the pale blue lights. She did not speak. She did not need to. Her silence pressed harder than any words could. Every eye in the room was drawn to her. Alien cadets, commanders, council members, each trapped in the weight of what they had just seen. For the first time, the proud alien cadets could not sit tall. Their backs bent slightly, their eyes lowered. They had been raised on stories that painted humans as fragile, soft beings who could not stand against advanced weapons. Yet here was one human whose body carried the truth, and the truth was undeniable. Their weapons had failed to end her. Their fire had failed to erase her. A young cadet swallowed hard. His voice was barely a whisper, but in the silence, everyone heard it. She should not be alive. His commander glared at him, but even the elder warriors could not deny it. The scars were evidence, more powerful than any report, any speech, any lesson. The lead commander clenched his fists on the armrest of his seat. His pride, once towering, now shook under the weight of shame. He had thought stripping the woman of her armor would reduce her to nothing. Instead, it had revealed something greater, proof of humanity's unbreakable spirit. He rose to his feet, trying to reclaim control. His voice thundered across the chamber. "Do not be deceived. These marks do not prove strength. They prove weakness. They prove that she was beaten, scarred, broken, again and again." But his words did not ring true. The cadets did not cheer. The commanders did not nod. Instead, they looked at each other in silence, their expressions uneasy. His words were like empty weapons, loud but powerless. The woman finally turned her head, her eyes fixing on him. She spoke quietly, but her voice carried across the chamber like a blade cutting through the air. "You say these scars prove weakness. But if I was weak, I would not be standing here." Her words struck harder than his roar. The cadets shifted in their seats. Some clenched their hands nervously. Some could not even look at her. For the first time, doubt entered their hearts. Not doubt in her, but doubt in their own leaders, their own empire. One of the older council members leaned forward, his voice almost trembling. We unleashed our fleets on her world. We brought fire and steel. And yet, she still lives. What kind of creature refuses to die?" The chamber grew tense. The question was dangerous, not because of the woman, but because of what it revealed. If the Empire's weapons could not destroy a single human, what chance did they have of crushing all of humanity? The woman took a single step forward. The sound of her boot against the metal floor echoed like a heartbeat. Strong, steady, relentless. I am not special, she said. I am not the only one. There are many like me. And that is what you fear. Her words spread like fire. The cadets exchanged uneasy glances. They had been told humans were rare survivors, exceptions to the rule. But she claimed otherwise. If there were more like her, if scars like hers existed on many humans, then the Empire faced something it could not control. One cadet, younger than the rest, could not contain himself. He whispered to the one beside him. She looks stronger without armor than with it. The other nodded silently. It was true. Her armor had made her look like a soldier. Her scars made her look like something greater. A survivor, unyielding and unbroken. The lead commander's anger boiled. He slammed his fist again. Silence. She is one human. One. Do not forget that. But his voice trembled, betraying his fear. The woman's calm was stronger than his fury. She raised her chin and spoke again, her tone sharper than steel. One human, yes. And one human is enough to remind you of what you could not kill. If you fear one, what will you do when you face all of us? Her words landed like a strike. The cadets' hearts pounded. The commanders shifted uneasily. Even the elder council members sat frozen, their authority crumbling. The woman had not lifted a weapon, not made a threat, yet she had turned the entire chamber upside down. The silence stretched long. The cadets, once proud, now sat with doubt. The commanders, once confident, now felt shame. And the woman, once seen as a prisoner, now stood like the only true victor in the room. She had revealed her scars, and in doing so, she had revealed something greater, truth. The truth that scars did not show weakness. They showed survival. They showed strength greater than weapons. They showed the will that no empire could crush. And in that chamber, every alien felt the same thought creep into their mind. If this is what one human can endure, what hope do we have against all of them? The chamber no longer felt like a place of judgment. It felt like a classroom, though none of the aliens would admit it. The human woman stood in the center, her scars revealed, her silence heavier than any weapon. Around her sat commanders, cadets, and council members, each one struggling with the same thought. They had expected to see weakness, but instead, they had been shown truth. The lead commander, still red with anger, pointed at her. His voice was harsh, but not as steady as before. You stand here as though these marks make you powerful. They are nothing but reminders that we broke you again and again. You only survived by chance. The woman lifted her chin. Her eyes glowed like steel under fire. When she spoke, her words were calm, yet they struck like thunder. Chance? No, this is not chance. This is choice. These scars are not reminders that you broke me. They are proof that you failed. Her voice carried across the chamber. The cadets shifted in their seats. Some bit their lips, unsure if they should look at her or look away. Even the older commanders could not hide the doubt in their eyes. She stepped forward, her bare feet moving across the cold metal floor, her scars catching the blue light. You think strength is in your ships, your weapons, your armies. You think war is about crushing bones and burning cities. But strength is not in destruction. It is in survival. It is in getting back up when the fire has burned you. It is in moving forward even when pain tries to hold you down. Her words cut through the silence. For the cadets, raised on discipline and control, her meaning was new, almost dangerous. They had been taught that scars were shame, that wounds were proof of weakness. But here was a human showing them the opposite. She turned her gaze toward the younger soldiers. Her tone softened slightly, though her fire remained. Look at me. Every line on my body is a story. Each scar means I faced death and walked away. Do you understand what that means? It means your invasion could not kill me. It means your power is not as strong as you believed. And if one human can carry all this and still stand here, what will you do when thousands of us stand against you? The cadets avoided her eyes, shame crawling over their skin. Some clenched their hands tightly, but others listened with open hearts. One cadet, younger than the rest, finally dared to raise his voice. If pain gives you strength, Then does that mean scars are victories? The woman turned her gaze on him. She did not smile, but there was a small spark of recognition in her eyes. Yes, she said simply. Scars are victories. They are proof that the enemy tried and failed. The chamber shifted again. The words spread among the cadets like a quiet fire. Victories, not shame. Survival, not weakness. It was a lesson their empire had never taught them, but now they could not ignore it. The lead commander growled, slamming his fist against his chair. Do not listen to her. She poisons your thoughts. She speaks like her kind has already won. The woman's gaze turned toward him. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharper than any blade. I do not need to claim victory, she replied. Your own fear already gives it to me. Her words froze him. The cadets' eyes widened. They saw the truth in her voice. The commander's anger came not from power, but from fear, the fear of losing control, the fear of facing something he could not defeat. She stepped forward again. Her scars shone brighter under the lights, like banners carried after battle. You asked me to remove my armor to show weakness, but you were wrong. Armor can be taken away. Weapons can be broken. Flesh can be scarred. But the will to rise again, that cannot be taken from me. That is the lesson you wanted to see, though you did not know it. The chamber was silent, every alien hanging on her words. She let the silence breathe for a moment before finishing. You came to my world thinking humans would bend, that we would shatter. But now you see we bend but we do not break. We bleed, but we do not surrender. We are fragile in body, yes, but in spirit, we are unkillable. The final word echoed in the air like a hammer. The cadets looked at one another, the lesson sinking into their hearts. Some felt shame, some felt respect, and some felt fear because they realized the empire had taught them lies. The council members exchanged uncertain glances. They had wanted to strip her bare, to humiliate her, to prove superiority. Instead, she had turned the chamber into her classroom. She had not just revealed her scars. She had revealed their weakness. The woman stood tall, unshaken, her eyes blazing with unspoken truth. The lesson was clear, and none of them would ever forget it. The chamber was no longer the same place. When the woman first entered, it had been a hall of judgment, a place where alien commanders and cadets felt strong, proud, untouchable. But now it felt smaller, weaker. The human had not lifted a weapon, yet she had broken their silence, their arrogance, their pride. She stood at the center, her armor scattered around her like fallen giants, her scars glowing in the cold blue light. She had spoken the truth. She had given the lesson. And now all that was left was the weight of her presence, the legacy of what she had revealed. The cadets were the first to change. Young eyes that once looked at humans with contempt now looked at her with something else. Respect. They shifted in their seats, whispering softly to one another. She carries battles on her skin. She faced death and still walks. She is more than we were told. The commanders sat stiff, their jaws tight. They wanted to deny it, but even their hearts betrayed them. Deep down, they knew her survival meant something their empire could not erase. If one human could endure this much, how many others could endure just the same? The lead commander tried one last time to reclaim control. His voice echoed, sharp and cold. You speak of scars as if they make you immortal. But scars fade. Flesh weakens. One day, human, you will fall. The woman lifted her chin. She did not shout. She did not fight. She simply answered, her voice calm but carrying more power than any roar. Yes, one day I will fall, but not today. And even when I do, my scars will remain. My story will remain, and others will rise carrying it forward. The chamber trembled with her words. The cadets looked at her not as a prisoner but as a symbol. Her scars were no longer hers alone. They belonged to history. They belonged to every survivor, every human who had stood against fire and refused to kneel. One elder council member, old and wise, lowered his head. His voice was almost a whisper. Scars that even our invasion could not kill. The phrase spread through the chamber like a wave. It was no longer insult. It was recognition. The woman turned slowly, her gaze sweeping across every face. She did not look at them with hatred. She did not need to. She looked at them with something more powerful: certainty. Certainty that her people could not be erased. Certainty that the truth of survival was stronger than their empire's lies. She bent down, picked up her helmet, and held it at her side. The metal was dented and cracked, but still solid, still hers. She did not rush to put it back on. She stood bare, scars open for all to see, and spoke one final time. You wanted to know what makes humans strong. It is not our weapons. It is not our armor. It is the will to rise again. That is our legacy. That is why you should fear us. Her words sank deep into every heart. The council, once eager to humiliate her, could no longer meet her eyes. The cadets, once eager to mock, now sat in silence, their pride broken. The guards, once ready to strike, now stood frozen, their weapons feeling small in their hands. She had entered the chamber as a prisoner. She was leaving as something else, something larger, untouchable, unforgettable. The lead commander finally sank back into his chair. His anger had burned out. What remained was something he did not want to admit: fear. The woman turned and walked toward the doors. Her steps echoed against the steel floor, steady and unshaken. With every step, the chamber seemed to grow colder, emptier. The aliens realized they had lost something far greater than a battle. They had lost the illusion of control. The doors opened with a hiss. Light spilled into the chamber. The human woman stepped into it without hesitation, carrying her scars like banners, her silence like thunder. Behind her, whispers began to spread. Cadets leaned close to one another, their voices soft but filled with awe. She is unkillable. She is proof. She carries the spirit of her world. Those whispers would not die in the chamber. They would spread across ships, across fleets, across the empire itself. The story of the scarred human would live longer than any single war. Because legends do not need weapons. Legends only need truth. And her truth was clear. Humans could be wounded, burned, scarred, but never erased. That day, the aliens came to understand something they had never been taught. Victory was not in destruction. Victory was in survival. And survival was something no one could take away from the humans. The chamber emptied slowly after she left, but the weight of her presence lingered. The cadets walked out quieter than before, carrying a new thought in their minds. The commanders stayed silent, unwilling to admit what they had felt. The council, once proud, now looked at each other with uneasy eyes. But all of them, every single one, knew the same thing. They had not witnessed weakness. They had witnessed a legacy. And that legacy would outlive them all.